What a stacked panel. This is, if you're interested in stablecoins, this is murderer's row right here. This is incredible. Well, I'm honored to be here today with this legendary panel. We have 35 minutes to get to all things stablecoins, but we're at the Bitcoin conference. And so I think it's important to start with probably the expert here, David. Why should we care about stablecoins, dollar-backed stablecoins at the Bitcoin conference?
Well, I think, first of all, why should we care about Bitcoin? And, I have gone through the experience of having the first really global stablecoin project fail in the most spectacular way with Libra/DM. And I think what that taught me is that you have to build on top of a neutral platform and network if you want to actually build something that's sustainable. And that's why we're building on top of Bitcoin and enabling people to move money across border in real time using real-time fast Bitcoin. That being said, stablecoins serve a real purpose, which is to extend the reach of the dollar in really, really remarkable ways. And what we care about is that if you have a stablecoin that is by definition a centralized asset that's actually run centrally by a company and people, and a centralized network, you're basically recreating the same financial infrastructure we have today with new players. And so what we think is really important is digitize the dollar, but then ensure that it travels on top of Bitcoin and make Bitcoin the fastest, most efficient network for stablecoins in the world. And that's what we're hard at work trying to do. But we believe both things are important. We believe that Bitcoin and stablecoin work really well together. And that's the way forward.
We have several bills that are proposed right now. Some of the leaders of those bills sitting on stage with us. Stablecoins may be the most powerful pro-dollar tool since Bretton Woods. Why is stablecoin legislation mission critical for U.S. competitiveness, dollar dominance, and President Trump's onshoring agenda? I'll start with you, Whip Emmer.
Well, thanks for having us, by the way, Cody. This is great. 20,000 people here last year. You got 30,000 people at the Bitcoin conference this year. Congratulations. And it has arrived. Why is stablecoin legislation so important? I think it's important with the other half of it, which is market structure at the same time. But both of these are absolutely necessary to ensure that this entire growth in digital assets is taking place right here in the United States. And to what you were just talking about, it's strengthening the U.S. dollar. It's exporting U.S. dollars. People want to do business in U.S. dollars around the world. This is only going to be good for the United States of America, and more importantly, for everyone around the globe, I believe.
Congressman Style, what happens if we get this wrong? If we're not able to move stablecoin legislation for the U.S. dollar, what happens?
It really would allow the United States to continue on the path that we were unfortunately under in the Biden administration with Gary Gensler. This is our opportunity with President Trump, with Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the House, to lead in the digital asset space. So we just suffered through 4 years of absolute mismanagement by the Biden administration, by Gary Gensler, and the result was the opposite of what Whip Emmer was just saying. It was pushing innovation and development outside the United States. This is our opportunity to have innovation and development in the United States if we get it right.
Sam, as a private sector innovator, I'll ask you the same question. As someone who's trying to issue a stablecoin in the United States right now, what happens if we fail?
Yeah, I mean, this whole panel is music to my ears because what Frax is trying to do with Frax USD is become the first Genius Bill legislation-compatible stablecoin built in the U.S., innovated in the U.S., and the entire point of stablecoins is that it is a transparent and regulated, stable asset. If you want fully permissionless, decentralized asset, there's Bitcoin, right? As Michael Saylor says, there is no second best, right? There is no second best to Bitcoin as a store of value. And so for stablecoins, the best design is to actually work with the government that actually issues the unit that you want to peg with. And that is what Frax is trying to do in being US-based and issue Frax USD and comply with the Genius Bill.
So I think it's safe to say you agree with David that stablecoins and Bitcoin don't compete with each other, but they actually complement each other.
Oh yeah, they are literally the most complementary, and so the whole title of this panel is Separation of Money and State, and I think the most important thing to think about is stablecoins bring the best of blockchain technology, the 24/7 settlement, global payments, everything there, to a safe and stable unit that is in the US's interest for global usage. And Bitcoin will always be the most decentralized, censorship-resistant unit and store of value. These two things don't compete. In fact, they make each other stronger.
Senator Hagerty, we're on the precipice, fingers crossed, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, of passing the Genius Act in the United States Senate. Just a round of applause that we're this close to passing the Genius Act in the United States Senate.
Big time.
We have a recess this week, and then we're going to get back to us. Can you tell the people, where does the Genius Act stand today as we're going through the amendment process, and why it's critical that we get this done sooner rather than later?
Well, certainly I can, and I want to thank you for having me, but also to have such great colleagues in the House of Representatives. With Chair Emmer, with Brian and I have been friends and have worked so closely together on this, and it's taken a tremendous amount of work, both in educating our colleagues as well as just pushing through a legislative process where time on the floor is the currency of the realm, right? And it's very, very limited because we've got to get cabinet members appointed, we've got to get ambassadors appointed. It's a very precious asset that we're consuming. And I have to say, the other side, led by Elizabeth Warren, is doing everything possible to force us to consume as much time, much delay as they possibly can. But here's what's going to happen. We're going to pass it. We're going to pass it with the help of my friends right up here on this stage. And we're going to see the United States move back into the realm of competitiveness again like never before. Innovation is going to happen here in America, just like Brian said. If I can leave you with a couple of major reductions that are going to happen with the stablecoin legislation, just think about this for a minute. One, we're going to reduce counterparty risk because of the time and the speed and the efficiency. And again, we're bringing our payment system into the 21st century. We've been relying on a payment system that was designed in the 70s and 80s. It's cumbersome, it takes time. It introduces counterparty risk, it introduces currency risk. Both of those go way, way down when the transaction is almost instantaneous, thanks to the technology we're talking about. If you think about this, it also reduces the cost to do a transaction because you're taking all this friction out of the system. And finally, it reduces the working capital necessary to float your accounts receivable or whatever it may be for the 5 to 10 days that it takes to clear in the old system. All of this makes our payment system cumbersome and outdated today. And we're going to take it into the 21st century and again, bring competitiveness back and open the door for the type of innovation that's represented right here on this stage. Thank you.
Those reasons, that rationale of why we have to pass this bill now, I'm curious how your colleagues in the Senate are responding to this. And it could be even a broader question. I would ask you, Whip Emmer and Congressman Style, the same thing. You know, what are the points when you're talking about stablecoin legislation or digital asset legislation more broadly that really seem to be resonating with their colleagues to get them energized to pass these bills?
I think the most important thing is that my colleagues understand where we're going with stablecoins. It's this first step, I think, in terms of appreciating what can happen here. And you mentioned it earlier. If I think about the major selling points to my colleagues, the cost savings that I went through, the efficiencies, that's all good. But if you think about what this does for dollar dominance around the world, the dollar has been the reserve currency of the world, and we've seen a slow degradation of that. This is going to turn the tables on this and move us right back to the fore. Second, demand for Treasury securities goes up. This is positive. If you look at the analysis that Citibank conducted, by 2030, that's just less than 5 years from now, you're going to see stablecoin issuers as the #1 holder of U.S. Treasuries, a benign holder, a stablecoin issuer as a holder, as opposed to some sovereign nation who may not have our best interests at heart. There, I'm thinking about the CCP, for example. So all of this from a national security standpoint, from the dominance of our dollar in the system and our economic, our economic competitiveness, all of it very positive from my colleagues. And then finally, there is also a major element of protecting the consumer here, because by establishing a dollar-denominated, backed up one-for-one with high-quality assets like United States Treasuries, short-term Treasuries, you have put a tremendous amount of certainty into the system. Again, that will facilitate this use all over the world, but also make consumers far, far safer because they're protected in ways like never before if something were bad to happen to an issuer.
Whip Emmer, Congressman Style, anything on how you educate your colleagues on these issues?
I mean, I think this is all about unlocking the golden age of digital assets and things like Bitcoin. And so this is our opportunity to really turn the tide after the past 4 years. The fallacy on the left is they'll want to set up an argument that says a nanny state government is best, that without explicit permission, you can't do anything. And the fallacy of some of our friends on the right is that failure to do any regulation in here will actually result in a laissez-faire system. But that's not true. Failure to act will result in really inefficient regulatory environment and enforcement actions driven forward by an executive state if we ever go back to an era of someone like President Biden or Gary Gensler. And so getting this right and having a fundamental principle in place and legislation in place will really allow, I think, incredible innovation and development to occur.
David, I would ask you the same question as you're talking to consumers directly. How are you educating them on why stablecoins are important?
So there are different types of stakeholders that really care about stablecoins. You know, the first one, like Congressman Emmer mentioned, is really so many people want desperately a US dollar bank account denominated, you know, in US dollars, a US bank account denominated in US dollars, and they can't have that. Stablecoins provide that to hundreds of millions of people around the world, and turning those assets into real money by law is actually going to enable the reach of the dollar to go so much further than it has in the last few years. So that's one set of stakeholders. And then another set of stakeholders are actually institutional players, and what Senator Hagerty was talking about around like limiting counterparty risks, making our market more efficient, and creating an infrastructure that enables real-time settlement and value movement across different systems that currently don't talk to one another. I think all of these are just going to enable us to continue to lead as a country and to ensure that as we build and reinvent the entire rails of the financial system, that we are the ones building it and not some other nation.
So hopefully, once the Genius Act passes the Senate, next week, maybe, we then turn to the House, where Congressman Style, you've been leading on the Stable Act, and I'll get to that in a second, but Whip Emmer, you've been a leader on these issues for a long time now, several Congresses. You've had multiple bills introduced. You're an OG in the space. What has it been like talking to your House colleagues on this, and why is it so important for the House to lead as well on these issues?
Well, it's been so much fun the last 3, 4, 5 years to see the growth that's taken place in the House and the Senate. And now you hear the talent of Bill Hagerty and Brian Style. These are just the tip of the iceberg. And Brian, you would agree with me that on the House Financial Services Committee, this isn't limited to Republicans. It's not a partisan issue on the committee. It's an American issue where we all are getting in alignment. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is Bill is going to get his bill across the line. We're not going to say maybe. It's going to get done. You're going to send it over to the House. Brian's running the committee. Brian will take it through a process with his Stable Act. We'll have the Genius Act right there with it. I'm sure you'll be looking at both of them, Brian. He'll mark them up. It'll go to the full committee. And French Hill, I believe you'll see by the end of July, French Hill will probably move through our committee with Brian Styles' help. He will move through the stablecoin legislation, likely to be the Hagerty legislation with who knows what modifications, and a market structure bill that has already been accomplished once in the House. This obviously is a different political environment, so it'll be a little bit different than it was a year ago. But those two will move through along with in the House in order to get votes. We end up putting these votes together. The president has asked for the stablecoin legislation and the market structure bill before the end of the summer, which means before the end of July. And in the House, we also have this little bill called the Prohibition on Central Bank Digital Currencies, which will preclude our government from ever trying to create a surveillance tool with digital money that will likely be voted on at the same time as those two major pieces of legislation.
Can I add something? This last piece of legislation gets at where the resistance has been in the Senate. Senator Warren only wants a centralized solution. You ask yourself, why is that? Why would they want a centralized solution, one that they can control, one that's issued by the government? so they can control us. And if you get to the very foundations of what's motivated people all over the country, and frankly, most of us in the Republican conference, it's the concept of liberty and freedom that this allows. It's the exact opposite of moving in the direction of the central bank digital currency. And my hat's off to my colleagues in the House of Representatives for putting a nail in the coffin of this terrible idea.
Whip Emmer, you touched on the support of the White House and the administration. I know yourself, Congressman Style, you were at the White House Crypto Summit. Can you talk about that support from the Trump administration and why it's so important in moving these bills forward?
Well, first off, at the Crypto Summit, those of us that were there will remember one of our colleagues sitting around the table said, if you would have told me a year ago that I was going to be in the White House for a Crypto Summit, I'd have thought that I'd be more likely I'd be in jail because of Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren and et al. In fact, it's a new day in America when you talk about digital assets in the space. Give Donald Trump credit for recognizing there is a group of voters in this country, 18 to 40 years old, who have grown up inside the internet. I mean, I was joking about it with somebody earlier today. When I was in high school, I didn't have a computer on my desk. These kids have had computers on their desk from day one. They think differently, they process differently. And I think President Trump, with the help of some family members and others around him, recognized this is a huge issue for 50 million Americans and beyond, and it's a huge issue for his self-proclaimed golden age of this country. This is part of unleashing the economic growth that's going to need to happen to make sure that we're here for generations to come. It's a great day that the White House is in. And have you noticed? Trump is all in.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add onto the congressman. I was actually at a dinner last night, and one of the things someone from the admin said is, what if we give you guys everything you want and you guys forget because there's midterms in 2026 and then there's 2028 and hopefully beyond. And one of the things that I actually said was, we as an industry are very, very loyal, and everyone who's a huge ally on this stage, and the Bitcoin community, the crypto community has a very, very, very strong memory. And once this industry is legalized, is transparent, it's safe, all of the big players understand that it wasn't possible without this administration, this Congress, this Senate, and we're lifelong, career-long allies. And so I think that's really, really important and needs to be said.
I'd just like to add one confession. Emmer and I are old enough to know how to use a slide rule. That's what we had on our desk in high school. But a critical point with respect to President Trump, and some of you in this room might have been with me. I met with him and industry folks back, when he was running for office down in Mar-a-Lago. We had the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, a great session with President Trump that really, I saw him begin to absorb the potential of this technology. And he's been a huge advocate of this. I promised him, I said, I will get this first piece of legislation, do this stablecoin legislation in the first 100 days. We had it out of our committee. Again, we have a cumbersome process in the Senate. That's a polite way to say it. And they've been able to slow us down a bit. We're just outside of the 100-day window, but we're working at pace to make sure that we get this delivered. President Trump is motivated to sign it and to take our nation into the 21st century all the way with payments and with this industry.
This is a key component of President Trump's agenda. And what President Trump is incredibly good at is putting attention on specific topics. And so when he leans in on this, because it's difficult to get anything done in Washington, with his assistance pushing this forward, I think that's going to help us get it across the line. And so it's great to see J.D. Vance coming and speaking here tomorrow. I think people are really excited to hear his speech tomorrow. I am. But having his support and push from this administration with President Trump, I think is going to help us actually get these bills across the line and signed into law.
Senator Hagerty, you touched on Senator Warren, and my question was going to be to the panel, who doesn't like these bills, whether it's the Genius Act or the Stable Act? Who doesn't want a U.S. stablecoin regulatory framework? What are we up against?
Two categories: those that are ideologically wed to central control, and this is just anathema to them. The other are just those that want to see everyone fail. They're so bitter about the results of the 2024 elections, losing control of the Senate, extending control in the House and taking the White House back for America. They're just so bitter that they're not going to support any sort of legislative victory, and America suffers as a result of this. But I would say this broadly speaking. We have right now 18 Democrats in the Senate that it has been murder to get them there. The first time we brought this to the floor, Elizabeth Warren was able to get every one of them to vote against me. But we've been able to turn it back. Our friends in the House are helping us too. It's delicate, it's fragile, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there, and thank you for all of your help. Let your representatives and your senators know this is important.
David, I'm curious from your perspective in the private sector, you can make the argument, I don't agree with it, but you could say, we've got stablecoins right now, and we don't have that regulatory framework. They're regulated by limited purpose trust charters or through the money transmission license regime. Why is it so critical we get this federal framework now?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of your question.
Why is it so critical we get this federal framework now?
Well, I think, it's really critical that we have clarity and that we don't have fragmentation. And I think, right now, there's just a lot of interpretation that's still, allowed, so to speak. And so I think it's really important that we get the legislation through both on the Genius bill and the market structure, so we have clear guidelines across the whole country and builders can actually build without looking over their shoulders. So, it's really critical.
And one of the most important things I usually tell people and explain is that these are not stablecoin bills per se. These are USD bills of upgrading the digital dollar to legally compliant, transparent dollars. And so these are very different than stablecoin guidelines in different countries, right? There's the UAE guidelines, there's the European MiCA guidelines, and these all have to do with USD, but those countries don't issue the USD. The US government issues USD. And the best way to actually issue the best, safest, most transparent US dollars with the best technology on blockchain rails is to be compliant with these bills. And that's what these bills actually give. And that's why it's so important, which is why Frax is working to actually be the first compliant Genius and Stablecoin Act legislation compliant stablecoin. Now, the issue, though, is that there's a lot of, as Senator Hagerty said, there's a lot of banks and other entities that don't necessarily want this to pass. And I can say from experience, from talking to partners and everyone in the private sector, a lot of them are just scared because they don't know where their place is in this new framework. And I think once more and more education is done and where institutions fall on this, like for example, Frax works with BlackRock, Fidelity, WisdomTree to custody our treasury bill assets, where banks would fit in on this. Once everything falls into place, I think everyone will understand that this is a very, very value-creating act and very efficiency-bringing act to the actual economy.
You touched on something important there, Sam. In both legislative proposals, non-banks are still able to issue stablecoins. And I'd be curious from the members, why was that so critical in putting in the bill, that you could still have non-banks being able to issue and compete in this industry?
Well, we already do have non-banks issuing stablecoins. Our goal wasn't to try to put people out of business. We're trying to encourage people to come into the business. And their requirements, their state requirements, their federal requirements, depending on whether you cross the $10 billion threshold. But what we want to do is have as inclusive an environment as we possibly can. You've got to abide by the rules. But as long as you can, I don't give a damn whether you're a bank or you're not a bank. I want you to meet the requirements for safety for the consumers and also the consistency that we want to see. But we want this proliferated around the globe. Again, back to dollar dominance, back to demand for treasuries. This is great for America. And we're not going to limit the issuers based on whether they happen to be registered with the OCC or not.
Competition is good for consumers. And so at the end, this is about putting competition into the space. And at the end of the day, it's the consumer that wins.
Whip, Emmer, you touched on, hopefully once we have stablecoins behind us. And I know this is a stablecoin panel, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what's next? Is market structure? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think market structure and the stablecoin legislation are two, they're both part of the same ecosystem. You really can't have one without the other, in our opinion. And I think that's why I said Bill's Genius Act will come over to the House in its current form. I expect there are some minor differences between some of our House members and the Genius Act. I don't expect big differences, but I'll leave that to the subcommittee chair, Brian Stile, and French Hill, and our membership, which, by the way, will be both, Cody, Republicans and Democrats. I may not be Maxine Waters. I know that'll surprise you, but there are a lot of Democrats on the committee that are working with us to try and get this thing done. And why? Because it's about predictability, certainty, clarity. This is the whole problem we've experienced. Brian was talking about it when we started. The last 4 years, they had an open door policy. Come on in and tell them what you're doing. They're going to kick you in the ass and sue you and do all kinds of other stuff. This is about establishing the clarity, the playing, the rules on the field so that you want to do business in this country and you want to take advantage of the opportunities that this is going to offer. I think that's what you were getting at, Brian, was that clarity, certainty, and predictability.
And Congressman Stile, with the Stable Act, I've heard you say they're 90% similar, the Stable Act and the Genius Act. What's that process look like in terms of reconciling those differences? I know Whip Emmer alluded to it, but.
I mean, at the end of the day, the goal is to get the legislation across the line. And so it's bringing these ideas together to make sure that we have the support in the Senate that Senator Hagerty is leading on and in the House. And I think we continue to get closer and closer to that end goal. The week ahead in the Senate, as this goes up to the floor, which Senator Hagerty is going to lead, is a huge moment. And so we're all going to be looking to the leadership of Senator Hagerty to be in a position to get this done. The goal is not pride of authorship. The goal is to reach an agreement where we have an opportunity to get this bill across the line and signed into law by President Trump. That needs to be the focus.
There's one thing I just underscore to share how difficult this can be. It's almost embarrassing for me to say this, but our stablecoin legislation was the first piece of standalone legislation to move through the Senate Banking Committee in 8 years. And it was a practically 4-hour debate. Elizabeth Warren sending it over the net, myself, Cynthia Lummis, Senator Scott sending it back after about 4 hours. And she'd done a good job of spreading the 84 amendments that she tried to make at the last minute to the bill to destroy it. The vote was taken. And you know what happened? She was able to hold 5 of her Democrat colleagues, and 5 came over and voted with me. And we had the most bipartisan product that we've had come out of the Senate Banking Committee in a decade, and the first one in the past 8 years.
And one thing I wanted to add is that Whip Emmer said is these are all bills in an ecosystem where the stablecoin legislation, then market structure, also the Bitcoin Reserve Act by Senator Loomis. And these go step by step. And like I said earlier, when stablecoin bills are hopefully passed, everyone like Frax, other people in the industry won't forget the lifelong support that we will be giving for the next step and the step after that. And these things build on top of each other in a step-by-step manner that can't be accomplished all at once, but they build incrementally to get everything that we need to do to have a pro-America innovation.
Yeah, momentum's critical. Momentum is critical here.
And I think it's remarkable that you're right. This is a bipartisan bill. This is a bipartisan issue. It was actually you, Whip Emmer, several years ago at a Bitcoin conference in Miami. You told me that this is a nonpartisan issue.
Yeah, don't use it's not bi. But when you say bipartisan, you've already identified 2 separate groups. This is nonpartisan. We are all the same on this. You're either in alignment or you're not. And it's not a Democrat-Republican thing.
David, I'm curious for you, what's one takeaway you would want the Bitcoin audience to take away on stablecoins?
Well, first of all, I do want to say, because I know we're almost at the end of this panel, that it feels like the best whiplash ever to be here today, and for someone who has lived under the tyranny of the previous administration trying to kill the entire industry that you're all here representing, to having both Congress and the White House under the leadership of many of my co-panelists here really completely flip the bit entirely to not only not wanting to kill an industry, but wanting to promote and help develop the industry here in America is honestly surreal. And, that's why elections matter. That's why all of your voices mattered. And if you think about the last edition of this conference and now, and where we are and the road we've traveled, it's really, really amazing. And these gentlemen all deserve a big, big round of applause for that.
To the members on stage, does this surprise you of how quickly we're moving? Again, I know I don't want to get ahead of myself. I know it's Washington, but I've been in Washington for a decade, and I've never seen legislation move this expeditiously in this bipartisan or nonpartisan of a manner. Are you guys surprised every day?
Well, it's taken a great deal of work by a terrific staff. The lead person on my staff, Luke Pettit, is soon to be the Assistant Secretary of Treasury for Financial Institutions, but he's done a tremendous job. Cynthia Lummis' team, Cynthia Gillibrand's team, to the point it's been bipartisan. Our staff have worked their hearts out. They know it's our priority. They're taking it. Senator Scott, Senator Lummis agreed with me as we started this Congress that this would be our first piece of legislation to the Senate Banking Committee. And my hat's off to Chairman Scott, too. I think he really wanted to turn that committee around. And Sherrod Brown is no longer in the Congress thanks to his lack of support, I would say, for this industry is an understatement. And we have a new day in the Senate Banking Committee, and this is our chance to demonstrate that, and we have. And we're pushing this across the floor. Everybody's rowing in the same direction right now that wants to see this done on a bipartisan basis. And I'm feeling very good that we're going to, as hard as it's been, I think we're going to get a product out that we'll all be proud of, and we'll be able to send it to you, Brian, very soon.
I think some of the speed that we feel is because of the juxtaposition of what we experienced for the past 4 years. And so actually a lot of work was being done by people like Whip Emmer and others for years, slogging in the policy to get the text, to get the understanding right. But I think we all knew we weren't going to have a good chance of having that signed into law by President Biden. Now we're in a position to really accelerate on the work that others have done in this space, Patrick McHenry, Tom Emmer, folks in the Senate. And so some of the speed that you see is because now we actually have light at the end of the tunnel, that we have a real opportunity to get this done. And so we're able to build on a lot of the work that was previously done in this space.
We're running out of time. I guess I'll ask one last question as we go down the panel. Are we going to get stablecoin legislation before August recess?
I mean, Frax is super excited to hopefully say yes, because we know that Bitcoin's always been great, the US dollar's always been great, and we want to do our part to upgrade the US dollar with crypto and blockchain technology, and so we're banking on it.
I am confident. As Brian knows, I'm always confident. I know somebody who counts the votes. We get these 3 bills to the House floor, which I have every confidence in Brian's style and French Hill, in the members of our committee, Republican and Democrat, wanting to get something done, and got a lot of confidence in the president, who said, I want it by the August recess. Make sure you get it done. So I think you've heard something that we don't get very often in Washington, D.C. Brian, it is that it's the juxtaposition of the slowness of the last 4 years, but it's something bigger. The election last November, for the people that are in this room and everybody who's similarly aligned, was sending a message to all of us in Washington. President promised this. We want you to get it done, and we want it done now. And Bill Hagerty showed how you can actually move a calcified organization called the U.S. Senate, where they never do anything. And this guy actually moved this through at record pace. That tells me we're going to get it done before the August break.
So yeah, I think it's going to happen. I think the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, you'll start to see not only just keeping the levels where they are, but adding to it. And one more prediction is I think that Bitcoin ultimately will be the winning network where stablecoins will exist as well over a longer period of time.
I'll just say this, we've opened the door now in a very positive way. You've heard all the tonality here on this stage. You'll hear it for the remainder of this conference. There's a new lift in people's step. This industry is going to thrive in America now. This is opening the door. This is the first step we're working together to make certain that that ecosystem is in place. And I couldn't be more proud to work with these gentlemen up here on stage to make it happen.
I would say not only will it happen, we have to get it done by August. Everybody is counting on us. This is our opportunity to really unlock the golden age of digital assets.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to get a U.S. stablecoin regulatory framework, and when we get it, it's because of these gentlemen on stage. Give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.